When my grandma passed away, she left me $60,000, her life savings. I was only 27, trying to build my future, but my parents told me they'd hold on to it for safekeeping. I trusted them, what they really did. They gave it all to my older brother who'd already bankrupted 2 startups. And when I lost everything and asked why, they looked me in the eye and said, "He's the son, he needs it more." That was the moment I realized if I wanted to succeed, I had to do it without them. My name is Emma. I'm 27 years old, and I grew up in a middle-class family in a quiet suburb just outside a big city. My parents had always been the traditional type, hardworking, old-fashioned, and convinced that family comes first no matter what. I had an older brother, Jake, who was kind of the golden child. People always said he had a charismatic personality, and honestly, he had a way of charming anyone he met. But behind the charm, things weren't so perfect. Growing up, Jake was always the risk taker. He had big dreams of being an entrepreneur, and he jumped from one business idea to another. The problem, he failed twice. Both startups went under, and both times my parents bailed him out financially and emotionally. They believed in him so much that they kept putting all their resources and energy into his dreams, no matter how unrealistic they seemed. Meanwhile, I was the quieter sibling. I wasn't the risk taker. I liked stability and hard work. I was studying computer science in college, hoping to build a solid career in tech. I wasn't flashy, and I didn't demand attention, but I was determined to make a good life for myself. My parents supported me in words at least, but I always felt like I was living in the shadow of my brother's big ambitions. Then something unexpected happened. My grandmother, who had always been close to me, passed away. She was the kind of person who loved quietly but deeply. After her funeral, my parents sat me down and told me that Grandma had left me $60,000. It was a lot of money to me, enough to help me finish school, maybe even start my own business one day. I was overwhelmed with gratitude, but my parents told me they would hold on to it for safekeeping, promising that they'd manage it wisely until I was ready. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, they were my parents. I trusted them. I assumed they'd keep the money safe and return it to me when I needed it. But the more time went on, the more I noticed things slipping away. One day, I overheard a conversation between my parents. They were talking about Jake's new startup idea, yet another attempt to make it big, and then my heart sank. They were planning to give Jake the $60,000 my inheritance to fund his business. I confronted them, hoping for some explanation, but the answer I got shook me to my core. "He's the son," my father said bluntly. "He needs it more than you do." I was stunned. I thought maybe they had made a mistake, or maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew this was their way of justifying favoritism, giving my brother the resources he'd been squandering for years while I was expected to fend for myself. Around the same time, my own life started falling apart. I'd been living in a small apartment, scraping by with a part-time job and freelance coding gigs. But suddenly, I lost my lease and had nowhere to go. My parents didn't offer me a place to stay after all their focus was all on Jake. I found myself living in my car for weeks, trying to keep my dignity intact while searching for a new job and a new place. The hardest part wasn't just losing my home. It was feeling invisible to the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. Every time I tried to bring up my struggles, I was met with excuses, silence, or worse, the reminder that he's the son, he needs it more. I won't lie, it hurt. deeply. But somewhere in that pain, something inside me shifted. I realized that if I wanted to change my story, I couldn't wait for anyone else to do it for me. I had to take control. So I started dedicating every free minute I had to learning programming. I'd always loved coding, but now it wasn't just a hobby, it was my lifeline. I took online courses, watched tutorials, and built little projects from scratch. I knew that in the tech world, success wasn't about who you knew, but what you could create. I began developing an idea for a health app, something simple but useful, that would help people track their wellness in a way that felt personal and motivating. I poured everything I had into this project, often working through the night in coffee shops or on borrowed Wi-Fi. At first, progress was slow. I faced countless setbacks, bugs in the code design problems, and self-doubt creeping in. But every time I felt like giving up, I reminded myself of those nights sleeping in my car, of my parents choosing my brother over me. That pushed me forward. Then one day, I posted a demo of the app on TikTok, hoping to get some feedback. I never expected what happened next. The video went viral. Thousands of people downloaded the app within days. Messages poured in from users who said the app helped them make real changes in their health. It was overwhelming and exhilarating. Slowly but surely, my app started generating revenue. I reinvested every dollar into improving features, hiring freelancers, and marketing. The business grew beyond what I ever imagined, and within 2 years, it was valued at over $2 million. As for my parents, when they realized I was no longer the struggling daughter, but a successful entrepreneur, they suddenly wanted to reconnect. But I was different now. I forgave them because holding on to anger would only hold me back. But I didn't forget, and I made it clear I wasn't going back to the family that abandoned me. This is my story, a story of betrayal, pain, and ultimately, empowerment. A reminder that sometimes the people we expect to have our backs don't. And when that happens, we have to find strength within ourselves to rise. When I first learned that my inheritance was being redirected to my brother's failing startup, it felt like a punch to the gut. Not just financially, but emotionally. That $60,000 wasn't just money to me. It was my grandmother's legacy, a symbol of her love and belief in my future. To see it handed over to Jake after all his failures made me question everything I thought I knew about my family. I confronted my parents, again hoping for honesty. I needed to understand why they chose him over me. My mother said softly, "Jake's dreams are bigger. He needs a chance to prove himself." My father added, "He's the son. The family has to support him." Their words cut deeper than any knife. It wasn't just favoritism. It was dismissal. My hopes, my needs, my worth, all ignored. Jake, meanwhile, acted like nothing was wrong. He never apologized or acknowledged what he'd taken from me. In fact, he seemed entitled to it. Whenever I brought up the inheritance, he brushed me off or changed the subject. It was as if my sacrifice and struggle meant nothing in his world. The financial strain hit me hard. Without that money, I couldn't finish school as planned. I couldn't afford rent anymore, and bills piled up quickly. I felt myself slipping from a hopeful young woman with dreams to someone barely surviving day to day. One night, after a particularly harsh argument with my parents, I packed what little I had and left my apartment. I had nowhere else to go. For weeks, I lived out of my car. I kept a small bag with clothes and my laptop, my only connection to hope. Sleeping in parking lots and gas stations, I told myself this was temporary, that I would find a way out. Every time I called my parents, I was met with coldness or excuses. They didn't see me as their daughter, struggling just as an inconvenience, the forgotten sibling. Their favorite son was their priority, and I was left to fend for myself. This was the darkest period of my life. I was overwhelmed by feelings of betrayal, abandonment, and despair. How could the people who were supposed to protect me turn their backs? How could love be so conditional? Yet, in that pain, something began to stir inside me. I refused to let their rejection define me. I decided that if they wouldn't support me, I would support myself. I threw myself into learning everything I could about programming and tech. I spent hours every day watching tutorials, reading articles, and practicing coding. I had no safety net, no safety cushion, only determination, and a laptop that was quickly becoming my lifeline. At first, it was overwhelming. I made countless mistakes, sometimes feeling like I was hitting a wall I couldn't climb. But I reminded myself that my grandmother's $60,000 wasn't lost. It had just been redirected. I would find another way to build my future. Slowly, I started sketching ideas for an app, something that combined my passion for technology with a genuine desire to help people. I noticed how many friends and family members struggled to keep up with their health goals, overwhelmed by complicated fitness trackers and impersonal advice. What if there was an app that made wellness simple, personalized, and motivating? The idea gave me purpose. I stayed up late working on the first prototypes, testing features, and asking for feedback from anyone willing to listen. Every small success, a bug fixed, a feature added, felt like a step toward reclaiming my life. But the tension with my family only grew. Whenever I mentioned my plans or my efforts to be independent, they dismissed me. My mother told me, "Why waste time on dreams when you should be grateful for what you've been given?" My father said, "Jake is our priority. You'll understand one day." Their words felt like chains trying to hold me down in a life I was desperate to escape, but I refused to be trapped. One night, after a particularly painful phone call where they refused to even acknowledge my struggles, I made a decision. I was done asking for permission or waiting for support that would never come. I would build something that didn't just prove them wrong. It would prove to myself that I was worth more than their neglect. That night, I wrote the first line of code for my app. It was a small act, but it felt like the first spark of a revolution in my life. The next few months were a blur of hard work and sacrifice. I juggled freelance gigs to pay for food and phone bills while coding every spare moment. I faced setbacks, crashes, bugs moments when I wanted to quit. But each obstacle only fueled my determination. Meanwhile, my brother's startup was struggling. I heard whispers from family gatherings that Jake was burning through the inheritance faster than anyone thought. But I didn't care. My focus was on building something real, something mine. Looking back, that period taught me more about strength and resilience than anything else. It showed me that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most can also hurt you the deepest. But it also showed me that the deepest wounds can become the strongest fuel for change. I was no longer just the daughter who lost her inheritance. I was becoming a woman who would rewrite her destiny on her own terms. After the decision to take control of my own life, the next months and years became a relentless test of everything I had mentally, physically, and emotionally. The betrayal from my parents was only the beginning. The world outside my family was not easy either, especially when you're starting from scratch, broke, and with no one to rely on. But I was determined to push through. I didn't just want to survive. I wanted to thrive and prove that the choices made by my family did not define me. At first, the challenges were overwhelming. I was living in my car, coding late into the night, hunting for coffee shops or libraries with free Wi-Fi, and balancing odd jobs that barely paid the bills. The cold nights in the parking lot, the exhaustion, the hunger, all became a kind of background noise. What kept me going was the vision of building something real, something that could change my life forever. Coding itself was a struggle at times. I wasn't a prodigy, and I had a lot to learn. Bugs would crash my app features. I built didn't work as expected, and the tech world was incredibly competitive. Every day felt like climbing a mountain with no summit in sight. But unlike before, I no longer feared failure. I accepted it as part of the process. In the midst of this chaos, my app slowly started to take shape. I called it Wellnest, a simple health app designed to help people track their wellness goals in a personalized, friendly way. I wanted it to be different from the cold, complex fitness apps that intimidated users. Wellnest sent daily reminders, offered small challenges, and celebrated every little victory. It wasn't just about numbers. It was about motivation and community. As the app developed, I realized I needed support. Without money, hiring professionals was impossible. So I turned to online communities forums, Reddit groups, and free mentorship programs. I connected with other developers, exchanged ideas, and found a few kindred spirits who believed in the app's potential. Their encouragement was invaluable, especially on days when I doubted myself. But the biggest challenge wasn't technical. It was emotional. Every time I thought about my parents and how they chose my brother over me, the pain surged anew. It was like a wound that refused to heal. Sometimes I found myself breaking down in tears, overwhelmed by loneliness and anger. I wanted to scream at them to demand justice, but the harsh truth was, they were unlikely to ever acknowledge what they'd done. One turning point came when I accidentally ran into my parents at a local coffee shop. They were with Jake, who looked tired and stressed, unlike the confident man I remembered. Seeing them together, so close and yet so distant from me, triggered a storm of emotions. My mother barely glanced my way. My father nodded politely, and Jake ignored me completely. I wanted to say something, anything, but I couldn't. Instead, I left without a word, swallowing my hurt and frustration. That encounter reminded me how deeply broken our family was and how far apart our paths had grown. Despite the emotional turmoil, I doubled down on the app. I experimented with marketing strategies, learned about user experience, and even dabbled in social media promotion. I posted videos demonstrating the app's features, sharing personal stories of struggle and perseverance. Slowly, the response grew. Then came the day I posted a video demo of Wellnest on TikTok. I was nervous, unsure if anyone would care. But within hours, the video started gaining traction. Hundreds, then thousands of views. Comments poured in, people thanking me for creating something that finally made health feel approachable. Others sharing their own journeys. For the first time, I felt seen and valued. As downloads increased, so did the app's features. I implemented feedback, adding customizable plans, community challenges, and motivational messages. I worked with volunteer designers and testers who believed in the project's mission. Every positive review was a small victory against the years of neglect and doubt. Of course, success came with its own pressures. Running a startup alone was exhausting. I was responsible for everything: coding, marketing, customer service, finances. Sleep became a luxury, and stress a constant companion. There were days I wanted to quit, nights I felt paralyzed by fear of failure. And then there was Jake. Rumors reached me that his latest startup had collapsed spectacularly, burning through the money I was supposed to inherit. Instead of sympathy, I felt a fierce sense of justice. He'd been handed everything and wasted it while I'd clawed my way from nothing. Despite this, I resisted the urge to gloat or seek revenge directly. My focus was on building my life, not tearing down his. Karma, I believed, would take its course. As wellness grew, so did the media attention. Local blogs picked up my story, fascinated by the young woman who had risen from homelessness to tech success. I was invited to speak at community events and even landed a small investment from an angel investor who saw the app's potential. That investment was a game changer. It allowed me to hire a small team, improve the app's infrastructure, and expand marketing. With professional help, Wellnest flourished. The user base skyrocketed, partnerships formed, and revenue started coming in steadily. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents remained fractured. They reached out occasionally, offering hollow apologies and vague promises of reconciliation. But I had changed. I no longer needed their validation or support. I replied once, telling them I forgave, but wouldn't forget. Then I stopped responding. The ultimate test came when they showed up at one of my public events, trying to reinsert themselves into my life. They wanted to take credit for my success to make amends. I looked at them from the stage, the crowd applauding me, and knew I had the power now. I told them, I appreciate your words, but the past is behind us. I'm not the same girl who trusted blindly. I'm stronger, wiser, and I built this without you. I forgive, but I don't forget, and I won't go back. That moment was liberating. It was the culmination of years of struggle, pain, and relentless determination. I had turned betrayal into strength, rejection into motivation. Today, Wellnest is valued at over $2 million, helping thousands of users lead healthier lives. I'm proud of what I built, not just the app, but the person I became. And while my family may never fully understand or support me, I've learned that sometimes the greatest family we can have is the one we build for ourselves. Just when I thought I had finally put the past behind me, life threw me a curveball, one that I never saw coming, but secretly hoped for. About 6 months after Wellnest's major breakthrough, I got an unexpected email from a top venture capital firm expressing interest in investing millions into my startup. The kind of opportunity that could take Wellnest from a promising app to a tech powerhouse. The firm was run by none other than an old friend of my mother's, someone who'd also been closely tied to my family's business dealings. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was as if fate had conspired to put me back in the very circles that had once rejected me. But this time, the power dynamics had shifted completely. I remember sitting at my small desk, staring at that email, a slow smile creeping across my face. The girl who had lived in her car coding on a battered laptop was now being courted by big money investors. It felt like the universe was finally balancing the scales. At the same time, news broke that Jake's latest startup had officially gone bankrupt. The money my parents had poured into him, my inheritance, and then some, was gone. Investors pulled out, creditors came knocking, and Jake was left with nothing but empty promises and a tarnished reputation. Suddenly, the golden son was exposed for what he was: reckless, irresponsible, and incapable of handling the opportunities he'd been given. And the parents who had championed him, their judgment was called into question publicly. Then came the invitation that sealed the twist. My parents, desperate to mend fences, reached out again, this time pleading for a meeting. They wanted to talk about family, about second chances. I had every reason to slam the door, but instead, I saw it as the perfect moment for my real revenge, not through anger or bitterness, but through power and grace. We met at a neutral cafe downtown. They looked older, wearier, humbled in a way I hadn't seen before. My mother apologized, stumbling over her words, trying to explain their decisions. My father admitted their mistakes, but begged for forgiveness. Jake sat quietly, avoiding eye contact, the shadow of failure hanging over him. I listened patiently. Then I told them the truth about my years of struggle, my nights sleeping in the car, and the countless moments I wanted to give up. I spoke about building Wellnest from nothing, about turning pain into purpose. And then came the best part. I revealed the valuation of Wellnest, $2 million, and climbing, and the major investment I had secured. Their jaws dropped. They had never imagined that the disposable daughter would come out on top. But I didn't gloat or boast. Instead, I offered them a simple choice. They could be part of my new world, but only if they respected me and accepted me on my terms. No more dismissals. No more favoritism. No more betrayal. They hesitated, then nodded slowly, clearly, humbled by the experience. That day marked a turning point. I didn't need their approval, but I gave them a chance to witness my success, honestly, not as beneficiaries of their favors, but as equals in a relationship rebuilt on respect. In the weeks that followed, the news of my comeback story went viral. People loved the narrative of the underestimated daughter who took everything she was denied and created something incredible. Interviews, podcasts, and social media shout-outs poured in. The karma was undeniable. The same family that had cast me aside was now coming back to me, hoping to be part of my new life. But I stayed firm. Forgiveness was offered, but forgetting was not an option. I learned that true strength isn't in revenge fueled by anger, but in rising above, in reclaiming your narrative, and in showing that love and respect must be earned. Reflecting on everything, I realized how much that betrayal had shaped me. It forced me to confront pain and transform it into resilience. It gave me a fire I didn't know I had. Now, As I sit in my own office looking out over the city skyline, I'm proud not just of the app or the money, but of the woman I've become. The daughter who was once overlooked, now unstoppable. The girl who lived in a car, now a CEO with a vision to change lives. And to my parents, I say this: I forgive you for the past. But I won't forget, and I won't go back. Looking back, the journey wasn't easy. The betrayal cut deep, and the road to rebuilding my life was filled with obstacles I never imagined facing. But every struggle, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt was worth it, because I found something far more valuable than money or status. I found myself. I proved that your worth isn't defined by what others give you, but by what you build with your own hands. I learned that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not just the people who hurt you. And most importantly, I discovered that sometimes the family we need isn't the one we're born into. It's the one we create through love, respect, and shared dreams. Today, Wellnest is more than an app. It's a community of people striving to be their best selves, just like I was. And every time I hear from a user who found hope, motivation, or healing through the app, I'm reminded why I kept going when everything seemed lost. My parents. They're part of my past, but they don't define my future. I choose to move forward with strength, kindness, and the knowledge that I'm capable of anything I set my mind to. So, if you're listening to this story, remember, no matter how dark it gets, your light can shine through. You can rise from betrayal, from pain, from rejection, and build a life that's truly yours. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't to break others, it's to build yourself up so high that they can never bring you down. And that's exactly what I did.